Hello, it is Throwback Thursday, September 3rd, 2020. Steve Cypress here. On a somber day, the expected but saddening news came yesterday to the sports world and more specifically the world of the New York Mets. One of the all-time greatest baseball players passed away at the age of 75. Tom Seaver, one of the greatest athletes, one of the greatest baseball players of all time, and certainly by far the greatest player in the history of the New York Mets franchise, and a childhood hero of mine. Back then, when I lived less than 10 minutes away from Shea Stadium where the Mets played, and anytime Tom Seaver was pitching, pitchers, if you don't know about baseball, they only pitch once every 4 days back then. Now it's every 5 days, but that was it. You didn't get a lot of chances to see Tom Seaver when he was pitching, especially if it was a Saturday or a Sunday, and we could get to the game. Man, we hopped on the train and we got over there to Shea Stadium, and what a treat to watch this guy pitch. But I got to tell you, as great as he was as a player, undeniably one of the greatest of all time, he was even a better person. I've never heard, do I need to do research? I don't know. I never heard anybody say a bad word about him. Total opposite. Everyone said how humble he was, how thankful he was for his fans. As the fans, we adored him and we thanked him for all the great times. And he led the Miracle Mets in 1969 to the improbable last place to first place world championship, where the whole city of New York and the whole world just went crazy with that upset season, the crazy Miracle Mets season. A bunch of young players. Nobody really expected anything out of that year, and Tom Seaver had a phenomenal year, won 25 games, struck out over 300 players. Let's see, I have the stats right here on my handy Tom Seaver collectible baseball card and a figurine put together by great childhood friend, my best friend growing up, became my best man when I got married. Scott Regenbogen made this for me and sent it to me. It was a total surprise. I'm like, check that out. I love it. There he is, Tom Seaver, number 41. And there's all his statistics on there. So I guess I could look at 1969. Pitched in 36 games, 273 innings, 25 wins, 7 losses, 208 strikeouts, 5 shutouts, an ERA of 2.21. That's 2 runs a game. Today it would practically, it would be the best you could imagine. Did it year after year. His lifetime earned run average, 2.86 for a 20-year career, less than 3 runs a game given up, 3,640 strikeouts, 311 wins. All magic marks, 3,000 strikeouts, 300 wins. There may never be another pitcher in the history of baseball that does 300 wins. There's been a few since, Tom, but now if they pitch every 5 days, they only go 6 innings or so. I mean, if they had here complete games, almost every game was complete game back then. And look at these shutouts year after year. That's complete games, no runs by the other team. 5, 5, 4, 3, 3, 5, 5, 3, 4, 5, over and over and over. Strikeouts, 205, 208, 283, 289, 249, 251, 201, 243, 235. He was just striking out everybody year after year after year. Still holds, it's now been tied, but the Major League record, he once struck out 10 straight players in a game. And at the time, he was the only one to do it. Now it's been tied, I think, maybe 2 or 3 times. Phil Breakfield's here. Great to see you, Phil. He was the first pitcher I ever saw, says Phil, who taught me what was meant when someone said, the great ones pitch with their legs. So true. Steel Springs, absolutely. You can see it in this picture even though you can't see his legs. Well, you can see just barely in the baseball card. I mean, it was all about that powerful stride, not to mention the precision. Every single stride, identical. That's how you pitch for 20 years. And that's how your arm lasts, as Phil says, because you pitch with your legs. I know it sounds strange to non-athletes, but Phil, being a champion boxer back in his days, knows that that's, of course, they say the same thing in boxing. You punch with your legs. What do you mean, Steve? What do you mean, Phil? You pitch baseball with your arm. You box with your hands and your arms. What are you talking about? Well, then you don't know. You haven't followed it. You haven't played it, and it doesn't matter. We're getting off into the weeds here, but man, Tom Seaver was just a joy. That's right. I mean, in sports, when you root for a team, you never know what's going to happen. Are they going to win? Are they going to lose? Going to be fun? Going to be disappointing? When you go to a game, you're excited about the smell of the fresh grass and there's the players. And if you get there early, like I always did, you get down there into the front row and you get autographs from your favorite players and any player actually that'll come give you an autograph, of course. And the whole thing's larger than life and you love all that. And then you hope that you also have a good experience and your team plays well and hopefully they win. And I got to tell you, did Tom Seaver ever deliver? Even on the rare occasions where he lost the game at home, it was almost always worth the price of admission, worth 100 times the price of admission just to watch him pitch. It was electrifying. I remember the first time we went down and we moved, we're kids. We bought our cheapest tickets we could and then we kept moving down. I remember at the end of a game, must have been a blowout or something because we went right down behind the plate, straight on. And it was the first time in my life that I actually saw a curveball curve. I was like, holy crap, it's a whole different game when you're watching from straight behind. That pitch is actually coming in, not only ridiculous mile a minute, but it's curving, and with every single pitch looking the same, every single stride, every single windup identical. Batters had no idea what was going on, but I mean, just a joy to watch. But as a person, what a great man Tom Seaver was. And I had my own brush with greatness when I was a vendor in Madison Square Garden as a 17-year-old kid in high school in 1977. No, it was, it was 1977. I was a 17-year-old kid. I was selling ice cream at a circus event on a Saturday afternoon. And a guy waved me down, weighing down in the good seats, the red seats back in those days, the best seats, and not way down, because to the circus, an event like that, you don't want to be too low to the ground. You want to be a little bit up. So he was in the perfect seats, about 2 rows from the aisle, going down into that best seat section, so you could see above to all the high wire racks and below to what's the clowns and what's going on. And so, of course, he had the best seats in the house. And flagged me over, said, I'll take an ice cream. And I looked and I said, come on now. It just looks like Tom Seaver. And right next to him was a strikingly, spectacularly beautiful California blonde model-looking woman. And that's his wife, Nancy. They're both from Southern California. Two all-American, Ken and Barbie, perfect-looking people, perfect acting people. I mean, it was another day, wasn't it? And then the 2 little girls next to him, and he had 2 little daughters. I was like, just seems like Tom Seaver. Oh, and when he handed me the 3 quarters for the 60-cent ice cream and said, keep the change, first of all, nobody ever tipped for an ice cream. If we were selling beer for 90 cents, they gave us $1 and said, keep the change. But no one tipped for an ice cream. They all expected the 15 cents change. And I make a motion like it's nothing, but back in those days, nowadays, an ice cream in a stadium probably costs $6 or $8. So 15 cents, no big deal. But back then, when something cost 60 cents, 15 cents meant something. And he said, keep the change. And I'll never forget. He handed me those 3 quarters with his thumb and forefinger like this. And I was like, those are the most perfectly manicured nails I've ever seen. Well, and of course, later when I found out, of course, it was Tom Seaver. At the time, I walked away. I thought that's not Tom Seaver. And I was like, well, that makes sense, because he makes his living with those 2 fingers. Because you got to put those 3 fingers on the baseball. These 2 fingers to throw the fastball, the curveball. I mean, players come out of games all the time if they got any kind of little blister coming out or any cut on the finger or anything at all. He had the most perfect hands, perfect fingers. So you think for 20 years, it's like a surgeon. This guy kept such care of his entire body, but especially that hand, those fingers, that arm. over and over, year after year. 35 games, 36, 36, 37, 36, 35, 36, 32, 36, 35. I mean, just doesn't happen. And then I'm looking like, what's with this 13? Oh, that's 1977. That's right. Because 1977 for the Mets, he pitched 13 games. And the Mets then, the owner, Donald Grant, did the worst, most heinous crime ever committed in the history of Mets, all-time Metsdom, and they've made a lot of incredible blunders. He failed to tender a contract to extend Seaver's contract for another year. They were in a dispute. He was notoriously penny pinching cheapskate. And anytime a player did well at all, he wanted to trade him or get rid of him. But this is Tom Seaver we're talking about. Didn't want to pay him the money. And back in those days, it wasn't $25 million a year like he would get now. He'd get $50 million a year. Back then it was 200, 300,000 or something. Come on. And a few years before that, it was 75 or 80,000. But didn't tender the contracts. What the news said, I remember. I could have looked it up here, but it was something about they had to get that contract out of him at midnight that night. Tom Seaver just said, that's it. That I'm declaring myself a free agent, and he was gone. And that shook the sports world, but especially New York City and Mets fans who, by the way, if you don't know why the Mets colors are orange and blue on the uniform, that's because the orange is for the former New York Giants, now in San Francisco, and the blue is for the former Brooklyn Dodgers, now in Los Angeles, because those two National League teams fled New York and went to the West Coast. And in 1962, the Mets were born in New York, and they took the colors of those two teams that fled and left all their fans high and dry, and they said, look, the orange and the blue is back in New York in the National League. We have a National League team. It's not just the American League Yankees anymore. The orange and the blue is back, you National League baseball lovers in New York. And so New York fans, National League baseball fans, had been left at the altar before. The Giants scramoosed out of town. The Dodgers scramoosed out of town. And now what happened? We lost the greatest player in franchise history, everybody's hero, Tom Seaver. I can't even say it and keep a straight face. I'll never forget it. No Mets fan who was alive at that time or could remember it, old enough to remember, would forget. And there he was. He's gone. And so that year was, after all those years over and over of over 30 games started and hundreds, 251 innings pitched, 277, 273, 290, 286, 262, 290, 236, 280, 271. I don't know, do the division, but 270 divided by 36 starts or 290 or 250 or whatever, it's pitching deep 7, 8, 9 innings a game. Those were the days. You went to see Tom Seaver? You got to see Tom Seaver. But 1977, suddenly it goes down to 13. Well, what happened? Gone. The Reds picked him up, and that same year, 77, 20 games started for the Reds. So there it is. 33 games started that year. And the next year, 36 for the Reds, and then 32 for the Reds, and then towards the end of his career now, 26, 23, 21. But then 34, 34, 35 as a 40-year-old pitcher. Same in that arm, thrown with the legs, never a major injury. Nowadays, players throw their arm out all the time. Oh, he's going to miss the whole next year with surgery, and he's out, and you understand he's on the injured list, and oh, this and that. And he can only go 6 innings. He can only throw 82 pitches. If they'd had a pitch count back then, he would have broken every counter. I mean, there was no pitch count back then. You just pitched. Tom Seaver was pitching. He just pitched. You don't take him out. He pitches the game all the time. What's with that? My internet connection went out. A hint that I should be at the end of the video, but here's part 2, and I'm standing right next to my modem right now. So for crying out loud, there's the modem. This connection should stay on right now while I just finish what I was saying. My dad taught me at an early age, when you see a star athlete around town or you see a celebrity, don't bother them. They're with their family. They're on their private time. You can sort of nod or wave or something. I'd see Earl Monroe and Walt Frazier and Willis Reed, and here's Tom Seaver and on and on. And, I know you want to, nowadays when everyone has a camera, and of course I'd want to get a photo, but couldn't do that. I wouldn't have done that to him. In fact, I was telling my beautiful wife Michelle about this yesterday. Undoubtedly, I'm sure he arrived after the event started, so it wouldn't be coming into the rush, and no one would really see him and see that he was there, because of course the whole garden would have gone crazy. And he was gone before intermission. And so, because at intermission, same thing, everyone would have stood up. Some people would have turned around. They would have said, holy crap, it's Tom Seaver. And 19,000 people would have mobbed him. And how unfair to his family and him. He wouldn't even be able to get out of there. But that was the story. They're like, oh no, playing the Mets tonight. And I'm like, oh my goodness. I at least would have said, you're my hero, thank you, or something. Who knows why. I was just said, thank you for everything you've done for New York Mets fans. And that was it. So I went back. And he was gone. And it was right before intermission. And so I missed my chance to say more than thank you to Tom Seaver, but just an amazing guy, amazing man. We found out, I don't know, could have looked it up, was it a year or two ago, that he had come down with dementia. And it wasn't just dementia like you see in a presidential candidate. It was some kind of body dementia. I can only imagine what that means. And he wasn't going to appear at the 50th anniversary of the New York Mets Miracle 1969 championship last year, where as many surviving, living members of that incredible, amazing team were showing up and being, celebrated. And also all the fans, especially my age, I used to go see Tom Seaver as a kid. And, we would revel in the memories, even though we're looking at old men. We'd say, oh, man, there he is. And I remember being selfish and thinking, like, oh, man, we don't get to see Tom Seaver. But, come on now. Clearly, he was unable to. You wouldn't want him going into a crowd. You wouldn't want him getting on a plane or traveling or doing any of that. They were like, look, he has dementia. He's not going to do any more public events, no interviews, no anything. He's going to live out the rest of his life in Southern California in his home with his wife, Nancy. And he's going to do what he likes to do, some gardening, and that's about it. And then the news came yesterday. At the age of 75, Tom Seaver has passed away. And so today is a sad day here, second day in a row in the Cypress household. And I am in full Mets regalia in honor of the great one, Tom Terrific, the greatest New York Mets player and person of all